So today we're joined by Michael Kasprowicz. Michael, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today, mate.
Thanks, Marty. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, but many of you actually might recognise Michael. Michael is actually an ex-Australian cricketer and also Australian board member, and is actually now the chairman of SportCorps, which, Michael, I'd love for you to introduce SportCorps and maybe give the audience a bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I like to think my journey, I suppose, like everyone really, it's I find the unconventional paths. I played 19 years of professional cricket for Queensland here, 10 years with the Australian cricket team as well, and through that process, I've just spent 8.5 years as the board member on the national governing body of cricket in this country. I've also been the Australian Cricketers Association president. I've worked in media. I've done an Australian Institute of Company Directors course, and well, most importantly, I do believe I'm the only Australian cricketer ever to have completed an MBA, a Master of Business, because I think that's where I said unconventional. I like to think that what I really was keen to do was finish playing all that cricket in high-performing teams, representing the Australian team in its peak, being part of all that, but wanting to convert those lessons into life afterwards, and go and find something outside of cricket that we're going to be pretty good at. Yeah,
no, I really appreciate you sharing with that, because there's a lot of audience in India, there's a lot of audience in the UK, and obviously Australia as well. But there's going to be a lot of audience through this for the American market as well. So I'm sure they'll start searching what cricket is, but at the same time, they're sports lovers. So I think the majority of the American people that I know absolutely know cricket. So thanks for joining us, mate. I've just got some simple questions. Love for you to share your thoughts with our audience, and the fact that you've moved from a professional, sporting professional life organisations into commercial land and enterprise space. I think it's a great transition of discipline into what we're doing on the corporate side. So I've just got a question in relation to, I'm really interested in your views on team dynamics, because you and I have had some great conversations on this, and I love it. Honestly, I feed off all the energy that you've got, your experience, but also the way you're thinking about it now has come from a lot of things in the past. So can you just share with us the importance of creating a clear plan, and think about that in the team context? Can you share a bit of that with us?
Yeah, I suppose transitioning from professional sport, where you've got a group of individuals highly motivated, your plan is really clear. There's a premiership or a trophy or something that we're all striving for, and I think that's the other thing with teams, is that in professional sport, and certainly high-performing teams, is the appreciation of all the different skill sets, knowing that it's not an individual. And maybe that's the benefit of coming from a team sport like cricket, where there are the different skills amongst all the people in our team. And for us to do well, the one thing for me, it's the most important thing, is that you can't rely on luck. Because the interesting thing about luck, and when I thought about it years ago, was the only team that talks about luck and refers to luck happens to be the loser. Yeah. Because they only talk about being unlucky. You never, ever, ever hear about the winning team, ever. So, as they're holding that trophy and they've won the premiership, saying, yeah, how lucky were we to win? That's all forgotten. Yeah. And so you don't want to be on that other side. Sure that cards might not fall your way, but ultimately it's about what you do with the ones you're given, which is the most important thing. And that's where having a clear plan is so important. Gives you direction when you do sort of deviate or things don't work, that you can pull it back to the center and get back on that trail.
Yeah, like it. And so I'd love to just focus a bit on the framework that you're talking about is a footprint for success. I mean, you've like all of us have had a lot of failures along the way. It's just part of the way that we sort of deal with it. But again, I wanted to put it into context of the dynamics of a team. So when you look at the dynamics of a team, what are some of the fundamental flaws you see that have created a path for failure.
Yeah, I played professional sport for 19 seasons, which was quite extraordinary. I was 17 years old when I started, 36 or so when I finished. So I saw a real range of different teams, not only just in Australia in a sporting sense, but I actually played Australian. I played for Australian Rugby Union as well. So I played the Australian schoolboys team. So I have had a good, I suppose, exposure to multiple sports. However, what I have found is that what I like to talk about, and I'll share today, certainly, Marty, is what I found the four things that exist in great teams, but are always just a little bit short, and the areas that really, not just good teams, but your pretty ordinary teams, don't have. Yeah. And for me, the formula is really simple. It starts with discipline. Now, keeping this kind of short, I use discipline. There's rules, there's consequences. When you think about every single environment around us in society, in schools, in family, that discipline is sort of the key, because everyone knows, if you like, that's the I like to say the foundations of any team, because you can build anything on top. Once you have that set in place, people know where they can go, how they can play, certainly how they behave. And I think then you can sort of build from there. Number two is communication. The great teams I've always been with have this just seamless information communication sharing. It can be positive, it can be negative, but it's also taken the same way. And every team or any relationship, if you like, that doesn't work, it's always the first thing that everyone says, there was a breakdown in communication. So that's the second part for me. Number three, I always think is respect. Now, when I say respect, I'm saying that because when you've got that discipline, everyone knows where to play, then we can communicate and talk, frankly and honestly with each other. The respect. Now, respecting obviously your teammates, but I think you have to respect your opposition as well. Yeah. More importantly, it's respect the history of where you've come from, what the game is, certainly the umpires. And I think putting those things in place, I know they're quite general, but I really found that these are the things that, that ordinary teams or just good teams kind of have, but it's your great teams. These things come through strong. But the most important thing that exists in your great teams, in your best environments, I found, the word I use is belief. Mm-hmm. And why I'm saying that is that there's lots of other ways to say this, or for individuals will have their own examples, but there's nothing like being in the dressing room when or in a team, when you're actually right up against it, but you can comfortably look around the team to all the members, and there's this confidence within the team, not arrogance, but a belief that we can get through this. We'll come through because we have the discipline in place, we can communicate, we respect along the way, and all the other layers, I suppose, of those teams, those parts. But it's quite incredible when you are in those dressing rooms or in those environments, when you have this thing called belief. You can't measure it. Yeah. So that's where a lot of academics won't understand it. Yeah. And it's the type of thing when, unless you've actually had it, felt it, it's real. It's quite herbal in many ways, and I don't generally live too much of a herbal life, but it's the one thing that is absolutely there in all of your best teams.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier. They were talking about leadership, and leaders lead from the front. And I sort of made the observation: leaders do lead from the front because it sets the discipline, the tone, the clear direction, things like that. But the best leaders are the ones that are standing next to you. Or the best leaders are the ones that actually sometimes take a background because they so believe in what you're going to do. Yep. They actually just let you get on and do it. And I love it, because that's my definition of leadership. It's not the person standing in the room. It's the person who actually is believing in what I can achieve, what I can do. And just put trust that I can do it. And when you do it, it's an amazing feeling. It's
so strong, isn't it? So yeah. And that's, to me, when I've any capacity I've been in a leadership capacity, is trying to absolutely follow through with that.
Yeah, and let's take that. Let's take the professional sporting analogies and put it into your professional life. post sport. What are some of the things that you've reflected on that was probably a little bit harder than what you thought it would be, or maybe some good lessons that you've learnt over the past few years when you're in the enterprise space?
I think not for 1 minute did I expect that it was going to be easy or transferable. I knew there was going to be adjustments along the way, and maybe the biggest example of that, as coming from the team environment, is the motivations of your team. You can't assume that everyone's got the same goals here or the same motivations to see this through, to make this work, or ultimately belief in what we're actually doing. And to me, whilst I say that wasn't a surprise, because I anticipated that wasn't going to be the case, because they weren't going to be highly motivated, athletes living their dream. There's no chance of that. But I was surprised at how first it is, how different it actually was. And I guess it was a great lesson in people. Not just, and we know plenty of personality types. I know in sport, you see every type, certainly the ranges. But I have to say, in my professional life post cricket, I've seen some absolute stunning examples of stuff that surprised me. Which is probably the best way. Of behaviours that even in some of these professional sporting teams, as individuals, people can be in a business sense. Was taken down some tracks there with some examples I've found of just another level.
I was going to say, you put that in a successful sporting team, it just wouldn't work.
No, I know there's the no dickhead policy.
What's that?
I know in a lot of teams talk about the no dickhead policy and those type of things, and I think that's where sport self-regulates in many ways. Yeah, like you come into a room because you do have a sense of the history of where we've come from or what we're going for and all that, and it does actually it regulates those behaviours pretty well. Different story in business.
Yeah, it's interesting what you talked about in relation to the history of especially Australian cricket. I mean, it's one of our highest achievements that a professional sports person can achieve in our country is to play for the Australian cricket team. And I think that foundation gives you a lot of purpose. When you enter an environment, you understand there's a legacy that you need to uphold to be able to move it forward and succeed.
That's right, yeah. Well, Donald Bradman talked about, now he was the greatest cricketer of all time. His performances back in 30s and 40s, his average is twice as good as any other player in history ever today. All his numbers, and of the players at the time, and certainly the numbers today. So in that sort of context, his line was that you have to make sure that you leave the game in a better way than when you found it, and that's your purpose. That's what you have to do. That's your role, if you like, to leave for the next person to come through. And do it.
Yeah, I love it. I could sit here all day and talk to you, which we do on the sidelines a lot. So
I know.
I really appreciate it. You taking the time to spend time with us and the global audience we have today.
Oh, look, I really appreciate it. I love sharing that. And like I said, rather than sort of sitting back and just talking about cricket and the performances and the people and individuals, I'd love taking away the lessons that I learned from the game. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just share what I found the biggest difference, biggest lessons, 3 lessons really quickly that I learned and take away that transfer. They do actually transfer across in life, not just in business, but certainly family, and certainly doing that with my 3 kids. But no one sat me down when I was 17 years old and sitting in the dressing room with Alan Border and Carl Rackman, all these, Craig McDermott, Greg Rich, all these stars. And I had posters in my bedroom of Alan Border, I reckon about 2 years earlier, next to him in the dressing room playing in the same team as the guy. He, one of the lessons I learned, based really simple, 3 words. And conveniently, they all start with letter P, is appreciating pain. Number 2 is understanding how perception works. Number 3 is possession or ownership, you're in charge of your journey. Pain ultimately, pain is that, look, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And you have to separate yourself from the crowd. And often things like going and doing an MBA is part of that process. You know, it's going to hurt, but tries to separate yourself. Number two is perception. And I'll come back to that MBA, because for me, that was the biggest bit of rebranding for me post cricket, because the standard thing for a professional sportsman is to go into coaching or commentating. It's being part of, that's what I kept getting asked. So by going and doing an MBA, it changes the conversation. That's part of the action of doing so. Now, I do like to say that sports people and politicians perhaps are the best two groups in society that understand how this perception piece works. And the way I describe that is that depending on which team you play for, people have an opinion about you. And they either love you or they hate you. You're left or right, or coming from Queensland, you're either maroon, or in New South Wales, blue. The Blues. We love you or we hate you. However, one of the things I always talked about is the only way to actually influence that perception is through action, through behaviour. So he's doing something a little bit maybe unexpected, and that's what, for me, that's what I've looked to always do. But ultimately, and this is the biggest lesson I know with my kids, is possession or the ownership. You are in charge of your journey. I know I used the luck piece earlier. You don't have to rely on that, but not everyone's given the same hand. And it's what you can do in your position, in your situation. And I think that's where the biggest test for everybody right now with COVID, with situation resetting almost, that everyone has had to do, not only in a business context, but also personally, looking at resetting a lot of things that we do. Changing those perceptions perhaps of us as a business person or our business, the way that we do things is really important. I think that's the most important thing right now for me, is ownership. Don't rely on someone else for things to fall in place.
That's brilliant. I like it. Hey, well, before I do let you go, because you did talk about you're in a generational from a cricketing standpoint with a lot of icons, a lot of legends of the game, and you achieved so much. Give us you got a funny story for us? Give us a funny story of something that you can share with the audience.
Oh, look, I think it's amazing the people you spend time with. Obviously, in a cricket tour, playing cricket, there's a lot of time on the field, but there's also a lot of time off the field. On the field, I guess your funny stories are, sledges. I think when all sledging is look, it's putting pressure on the opposition, getting into their head, into their mind, and saying something that gets them thinking about anything other than the performance of watching the ball or hitting the ball. Look, there's been some funny sort of like lines and sledges and stuff like that. I think Jim Ormond, who's a young bowler in England, one day I was actually playing the game. We're in Leicestershire. English audience will appreciate this. Anyway, Shane Warne was bowling, great Australian leg spinner, and Jim Ormond kept playing and missing. And then Mark Waugh, who was one of Australia's finest batsmen, who has a twin brother named Stephen Waugh, he starts mouthing off and said to James Ormond, he said, "Mate, can you just hurry up and get out? You're wasting all our time." And James Ormond turns around to Mark Waugh, one of Australia's greatest players, turns around and says to him, "Shut up, mate. At least I'm the best player in my family." So, and he's probably right with that too, because Steve Waugh is considered one of the greats. But I think too that the other thing when I said off the field,
did Mark have a back to that?
No, it wanted nothing. Nothing. It generally does, but nothing that one. I think what happens is because you're spending so much time off the field with people, you get to know them really well. And one of my favourite people, it's definitely not a batsman. It's got to be a fast bowler, like me. But all the fast bowlers, we get on fantastically. But Glenn McGrath is one of the more, not only unique, but exceptional human beings I've ever come across. He's a guy who wasn't in any junior pathways, identified early. He lived in a place called Narromine, which is in northwest New South Wales. It is literally the back of Bourke, where Bourke is, and if people know Australia or Western, the middle of Australia. He moved down to Sydney on a light invitation to play club cricket. He lived in a caravan for the first 6 months to 12 months, then got picked up. Next thing, he played for New South Wales, got picked for Australia. And he was easily the most consistent fast bowler of all time. But what makes him so exceptional was that his positivity was incredible. His wife, Jane, first wife, I should say, Jane McGrath, she unfortunately contracted cancer, and she beat it. There was a breast cancer to start with, and then it came back. And she unfortunately passed away. This guy, whenever you saw him, every single day was, how you going, mate? He was always never better. That was his response, because he lived his life in every single day that he was doing. Everything was positive. How good this. Even when he stepped on the ball and over in 2005 Ashes in Edgbaston and did his ankle, giving me the opportunity to play the test match over there, the third test match. But this isn't a cricket sporty, so we'll come back to that another time. And my involvement in that one. But he turns up the next day in a big black moon boot, in crutches, and oh mate, how you going? Response: never felt better. Once again, just an extraordinary human being.
Listening to that in itself, isn't it? That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think maybe it comes back to that little ownership piece as well. But But look, the thing is, I'm actually, I've really enjoyed transferring that into a business context now, Marty. And I know that I've shared it with you before, but to be involved with a business that's actually developed a smart cricket ball. We've actually got technology that we've been able to put into a cricket ball. This is Sport Core, working with Kookaburra, who is the best and most recognised cricket ball manufacturer in world cricket. All 50 over, 2020, every commercial game or broadcast game of cricket in those contexts all use the white Kookaburra turf. It was just an extraordinary thing, but more importantly, it's involved in transferring all those lessons into creating a team, in obviously being involved in sport, but more importantly, it's a data company. We're an IT company, software as a service, IoT. Is the space that we're working in at the moment, which is really, really exciting, given not only where society is, I suppose, and subscription models across everything we do these days, but data being involved in that and be able to collect the data from inside a cricket ball to give not only at the highest level players feedback about their performance, and also broadcast, but more importantly, you and me and our kids will also be able to use the same ball and compare themselves not only to the great players, Nathan Lyon with the Revolutions or Mitchell Stark with the speed, but also their mates. And even if they're lucky, they'll be able to compare it to their fathers as well in the backyard.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's very exciting. I've enjoyed learning about your journey on that front as well. So
it's a journey, all right. It's the startup world, mate. I got to say, it doesn't matter. All the books I've read about startups and the hard thing about hard things and Ben Horowitz and all the books, all the great examples. This is textbook, absolute textbook startup, which is part of the narrative that's going to make an awesome story one day.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, Michael, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to continuing many conversations with you.
Marty, I really appreciate it. And also for stratapp, mate. Thanks for the introduction, obviously, to it. And, really looking forward to using and being part of it, mate. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Good luck. Thank you.